everyone, my name is Gabby and it's almost the end of 2017. We are getting so close to the end of the year and it's crazy how fast this year has gone by. I've got to do so many amazing things and read so many amazing books. So of course it's time for my favorites of 2017 video. I tried to do this last year, but then I just ran out of time because I have final exams and then Christmas happens and then there's like that time in between Christmas and I'm trying to catch up on videos and then I didn't get around to it. And I think a lot of that was because it's so hard to pick favorites for the year because there's so many great books that I've read this year, because I tend to read books that I know I'm either really going to love or new releases that just sound really interesting to me that like everybody is excited about. So it's hard to have books that I dislike because naturally I'm spending my time reading books that I know that I'm going to enjoy. I managed to pick out 19 of the books that I've read this year that I've really enjoyed, and I'm still reading a few books and I'm hoping to finish a few more books before the year ends, so who knows if those books will end up becoming favorites. I have some here from each month that I read and really enjoyed, and I'm excited to discuss them with all of you, but because I have so many books, my descriptions are to be kept relatively brief, and I'm going to link down below my playlist with all of my wrap-ups from the past year so that if you want more in-depth thoughts and analysis, you can go and check out that video, just because all of these books will be mentioned in a wrap-up because I've read them at some point in 2017. And it's not just new releases, it's old books that have now for a few years that I picked up in 2017 and really enjoyed. So are actually a part of a series. So the first few books on this list are actually a part of a series, and that is the Red Rising trilogy by Pierce Brown. This was the first series that I read this year, and I absolutely loved it. I loved the characters, I loved the suspense and the crazy things that go down this world. There's fight scenes and action sequences. Everything's taking place in space. The first book has more of like a Hunger Games vibe, and then the later books feel more Star Wars and they get more intense, and there's a lot more that goes on with the world, and you just get to dive so much more into the characters and things become so much more in depth, and everything just completely and entirely changes, and it's the greatest thing I have ever read. I reviewed this series on my channel, so if you want to see more of my thoughts, I will leave that review linked down below. I believe there's a non-spoiler section and a spoiler section. I go into depth with some of my favorite things about this series and what I liked and what I found really interesting. I think one of the things that I love most about this series, and what I'm going to briefly mention here, and this is something that I also mentioned in the review, is just how much Pierce grows just within this one series and within 3 books. Like, the first book is very different than the second and the third book, and you see these like immediate shifts where everything changes. And for an author to be able to do that just within the span of 3 books is insane, because sometimes it takes authors series on top of series on top of series to be able to really grow, and for Pierce Brown to be able to do that just within the span of 3 books is insane. And one of the reasons why I love this series is that it kept me turning pages until the very end. I stayed up until like 1, 2 in the morning reading these books just because I could not put them down and I wanted to know what happened next. Like, I remember I finished Golden Sun at like 1:30 in the morning and I immediately went to my room and grabbed Morning Star and started it because I needed to know what happened next. And there is not a single book that I have read besides this series that has kept me up that late reading, because I'm the type of person that will like conk out at 9, 10 o'clock because I get up at 5:30 in the morning every day. I'm not gonna stay up late for anything. I'm too exhausted. So if there's a book series that can get me to stay up to like 1, 2 in the morning, then it does a hell of a freaking good job at being entertaining and suspenseful. So this was definitely a favorite of the year. I absolutely loved it. I think out of the 3, my favorite was definitely Morning Star, because it's become one of my favorite conclusions of all time just because of how crazy suspenseful it was. The next book that I have on this list is A List of Cages by Robin Rowe. So it perfectly fits this little list thing that I have going here because of the title. This was a book that I didn't think would stick with me throughout the year, but like looking through all the books that I've read this year, this is one that immediately just brought me back to sitting on the couch and reading this book and just being really emotionally impacted by it. And the characters, I love Adam and Julian and their brothership and the way that they connect with each other. They just have such a beautiful relationship, and I love getting to see brotherships in novels and getting to see the type of relationships that are formed between siblings, because I don't have any siblings of my own, so I always like getting to read novels that include sibling relationships. I also love the parental aspect that plays into the story, because I feel like in YA novels, parental aspects or parental relationships are either like non-existent or really broken and fractured in some way because a parent is evil or is like gone off the map. And to see just a really nice and healthy parental relationship between Adam and his mother was really nice. And of course, this book deals with a really huge aspect that involves parents and abuse I think that that's a topic that you don't see targeted in YA at all. That's very, very, very important. It broke my heart to read some of the things that I did in this book, but it made me realize that this happens to real people. This isn't just a fictional story, and it really, really hit me, and it really touched me, and it's just such a beautiful story, and I'm so glad that I got to read it this year. And that's mainly because of all of you that were just screaming your enthusiasm for this book online, that I had to go and pick it up, and I'm very glad that I did, because it's a story that has touched me and definitely will stay with me forever. So next book that I have here is one that I read for school, which is insane that a book that I read for school has made my favorites list, and that is The Great Gatsby. I read this sophomore year, towards the end of the year, and it has become my favorite classic of all time. I love the 1920s period. I love Gatsby and Nick and their relationship. I love the way that this novel is written. I love all of the metaphors and things that go into it. I love the way that my English teacher taught this book, because I got to get so in depth with the time period and what was going on, and I was able to appreciate and understand everything that was happening, and it just felt like I really was able to immerse myself in the 1920s period, and it felt like I was really there when these things were happening. And getting to watch the movie with Leonardo DiCaprio just made me so much more intrigued and interested in this world, especially the way that they interpret that ending. It hit me like a ton of bricks, because it just perfectly communicates everything that is going on in this world, and I love it so much, to the point where my mom got me a Great Gatsby bookish candle for Christmas, and I love it. I love this classic, and I normally don't like classics, but this didn't feel like a classic to me. Like, it felt like a YA novel because of the characters and just like how pure they are, especially Gatsby. Gatsby genuinely feels like a YA character even though he's an adult, but that's how pure and raw his emotions are, and I just loved this book so much. I can't even describe it to you, but it was just such a good classic, and it made me want to go and find YA novels that are set in the 1920s to read so that I could immerse myself more in this time period, because I loved this book so much. So the next book on this list is a part of a duology, and that is The Savage Song by V.E. Schwab. So I'm going to also include Our Dark Duet on this list, like I included all of the Red Rising books on my list, but I don't want to hold all of them because that would be really, really heavy and not worth my time and demolishing my bookshelf. Not worth it. These are the first few books that I've read from Victoria Schwab, and they completely blew me away. This was another series that I was staying up late to read because it had so many twists and turns. It was so dark and so compelling and so interesting. I just fell in love with the characters and a lot of the eeriness that went down. Our Dark Duet like hit me like a ton of bricks. I loved August and Kate and their relationship and how it never was truly romantic, but it was just a beautiful friendship, and it was just such a refreshing read. And some of our villains are really creepy and really eerie. The way that Victoria Schwab develops this world is so compelling, and it was just a really fun and really enticing read, and it made me super excited to get to read more of Victoria / V.E. Schwab's books in the future. So now getting into some contemporaries, kinda. The next book that is on my favorites of 2017 list is Alex and Eliza by Melissa De La Cruz. So this is a book that I've been excited for a really long period of time. The minute that it came out, I had to get my hands on it, and I loved getting to read a retelling of Alexander Hamilton and Eliza Hamilton. I love the way that Melissa De La Cruz interpreted Alex and Eliza's story and how she made it different from Lin-Manuel Miranda, because that's what a lot of people would think, is that like she saw Hamilton and was like, okay, I'm gonna tell my own story and just basically take whatever Lin wrote and put it in book form. That's not the case at all. She definitely made it very unique and brought her own perspective to it, and I love that. I love seeing how the Schuyler sisters are very different from Lynn's interpretation and how she just made this world her own. I know that she is releasing a sequel to this next year or 2 years from now. I'm not exactly sure, but I'm incredibly excited to get to read more from this world, just because I think Melissa De La Cruz did an amazing job with the story, because it's one that you can really personally relate to. And I think when an author is really able to connect to a world and to characters, the story just becomes so much more compelling and interesting to read, because all of like the blood, sweat, and tears that the author puts into writing the story just comes out so nicely, because they personally connect to the information that they're writing and they wholeheartedly believe in the messages and things that they're telling because they have the personal experience with it. And it definitely got that from this book, and it was just so much fun to read, loving Hamilton as I do, and it was just so exciting to see like little references to the Hamilton musical and little things that I know from reading Ron Chernow's Alexander Hamilton, which is a book that I also enjoyed this year but did not include on this list just because I wanted to focus more on the YA genre of books that I read. But I loved this, and it was just so much fun and the perfect book to satisfy my Hamilton heart. Next on the list, we have the book that is probably my favorite diverse read of 2017, and that is Queens of Geek by Jen Wild. 3 friends, 2 love stories, 1 Con convention. This book is so badass. You have so many incredibly diverse characters and diverse representation throughout this book, and it's only a little over 200 pages. I have no idea how Jen Wilde does it, but I absolutely love it. You have characters that have anxiety and characters that are different ethnicities that are part of the LGBTQ+ spectrum and are vloggers and actresses. You have like geek and fandom culture represented in the story. You have body positivity. There's so many crazy things that are going down in this book within the world of like diversity and representation that I could sit here for like a half an hour listing things. You also have feminism that's brought into the story, and there's so many things that still haven't even come to mind just because it's been a while since I've read this, but I love it so much. I just love the diversity. I love the geek culture. I love that the story takes place at a convention. It was just such a fun read. If you're looking for a book that's incredibly diverse, like this is going to be it because it has representation all across the spectrum. Like everything is there. It's all touched on. It's not like one item overshadows the other. It's just diversity that is all represented beautifully, and I loved it. Speaking of geek and fandom culture, the next book on this list is Geekerella by Ashley Poston. I love this book so much. I know there's a lot of people that really didn't like it because they thought it was predictable, but honestly, I think one of the reasons why I really love this book is because it managed to balance its predictability well, if you sort of understand what I'm saying, because this is a Cinderella retelling that has like geek and fandom culture woven into it, and so there's going to be aspects of Cinderella that are going to have to be in this plot. So of course there are going to be certain things that you're expecting to happen because you want to see the Cinderella retelling represented within the novel. Yes, it's going to be predictable, but it's executed really well to the point where I was reading this and gasping and being like, oh my god, I love how this fits in, and just being really surprised about how this classic story that we all know is woven into the geek and fandom culture, because Cinderella is one of those stories that has been retold time and time and time and time again. So it can be incredibly boring, but Ashley Poston just brought such a new spin to this story that we all know and love, and with the geek and fandom culture, it just really hit me. I also love how she takes time to discuss how sometimes people are put down for like loving fandoms and how they put a lot of time and effort into them, and like they have all this passion for it that people just don't understand, and so they put them down for that. And I've gone through that in my own life, and especially when it's within your own household and it's something that you can't escape, I feel like you don't see that representation at all, and I really loved how that fits into the story. I mean, obviously because you're having to include like the evil stepmother, so that was a very interesting way to include that, but it's the fact that that's her own mother, or at least mother figure, that is telling her those things and putting her down for loving fandom and being a part of like a geek and fandom culture. You just don't see that representation a lot, and it really meant a lot to me because I can very deeply resonate with that. So this is a story that I really connected to and really, really love. I got to meet Ashley Poston this year. She was the absolute sweetest, and it just made me fall in love with this book so much more, and the cover's gorgeous. All the beautiful words inside it are gorgeous, and I just loved it because it really, really touched me. Keeping it coming, the next book that we have on this list is Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli. So I wanted to pick one of the two books that Becky has out so far to put on this list, and ultimately Simon vs. was definitely more of my favorite than The Upside of Unrequited was, although I really did enjoy that book and really did connect to the unrequited love aspect of that novel. But I just really loved Simon vs. and I think a lot of it is coming from the hype with the movie adaptation that is coming out in March. I love the characters, I love the story, I love how it deals with coming out and how that feels, because you really don't get a lot of novels that focus on that or make that the center of their plotline. So I just really appreciated this story. I know there's so many people that love it, and it's been one that I've been meaning to read for years, and I finally picked it up. I got to meet Becky Albertalli, and she was the absolute sweetest, and it was just such a fun book to read, and it was another story that I just really, really connected to and really loved. And really honestly, looking at all these books, the one common theme that I have with all of them is just the way that they've touched my heart and the way that they've become like a little part of me as a reader, and this is a book that definitely did that for me. I just love all the characters, and I'm really excited for Leah on the Offbeat, which comes out next year, and to get to see more from this world and these characters, because I've just really, really grown to love them throughout this past year, and I'm so glad that I got to pick this book up. I feel like I'm saying that with all of these books, but it's just because they really mean a lot to me. So the next few books on this list are a part of a series series, and that is the Darkest Mind trilogy by Alexandra Bracken. This is another one that I've been meaning to read for years, and I finally got around to it, and I knocked out some of those series that I've been really dying to read, and this was another one of them. I love this series because you get to see a whole bunch of kids that have these powers and the society that they're placed under because they're seen as weird or different because they have these gifts, and I just love the way that that's represented. I love getting to see these characters become empowered. I love the relationship between Liam and Ruby, and the story is just so emotional, and you grow to love all the characters, and it just really hits you when you start to get to the last book in this series because you've grown with so many of these characters, and you've seen the world change and develop, and the characters grow and develop, and you've seen them go through so many struggles and hardships that to get to that last book and see how everything wraps up is just really interesting. And this is a series that really hit me because there's so many sad moments and so many moments where you're like crying and you're like screaming and you're like, no, why is this happening? You're just so immersed in the world and in the characters and the relationships that are formed. And this is a really great series because it very much balances characters and plotline very well and mixes them together so that one doesn't overshadow the other. And I definitely enjoyed this series a lot more than Passenger and Wayfarer just because I feel like it was a lot more fun and it was easier to connect with the characters and what was going on, and I just had more fun with it. So this definitely had to be one of my favorites that I read this year. So the next book that we have here, even though I said that I wasn't ranking these, is by far my favorite of this year, and that is Lord of Shadows by Cassandra Clare. This book actually matches my scarf, which is kind of cool. Anyway, Cassie Clare. I love everything that she has written, and like a tenth of the books that I've read this year have been Cassie Clare books because I reread all of the Mortal Instruments series and the Infernal Devices, so that's 9 books, and then this is 10, and I've read like about 80 something books this year. So what would that be? That math, I don't know, but that was a fraction of the books that I've read this year were Cassie Clare books. So she was a large part of my reading for this year, and I love her books and I love her characters, and this world is no exception. It's so much darker. Cassie has taken so many more risks. There's so many more intriguing things going on, things that leave me questioning and wondering what's gonna happen next, and I'm just in love with this world, in love with her book. And I have a review for Lady Midnight and Lord of Shadows. I'll leave my Lord of Shadows one link down below because personally I think it's better because I go and dissect like all the major plot points and things that went down in this book that I'm really compelled by and have some thoughts and theories on. So if you want to see that, it'll be linked down below. I just love this book so much. It's definitely one of my favorites of the year, and I'm just so proud of Cassie and how she's grown as an author. So the next book on this list was the first Diversity Readers Book Club pick of the month, and that is Tash Hart's Tolstoy by Catherine Ormsby. I love this book for its asexuality representation and its representation within the YouTube community. It just was two things that I really resonated with, and I loved all of the characters and some of the messages that the story sends about asexuality and coming into your skin and sort of figuring yourself out and understanding who you are, and also dealing with like fame on the internet and how to manage all of that, especially when you're working with another group of people and you're having to sort of balance the spotlight. It's just so compelling and so interesting, and as a creator myself, I definitely very much resonated with it, and it definitely has a special place in my heart because it's the first book that I got to have the Diversity Readers discussion with. We just had such a great discussion. It just started so many amazing memories that I have from this year with discussing so many phenomenal books and you guys asking questions and just really being a part of the discussion. It's just so much fun to do these live shows every month because we really get to have conversations about diverse books and diverse characters, and I've been reading so much more widely this year than I ever have in the past, and a lot of the books that are on this list are incredibly diverse, and it just makes me so excited to see myself growing as a reader and reading more widely than I ever have before, and this book definitely fits that list, and I'm just so excited that I got to pick it up this year because it's another one that I really resonated with, as I have with a lot of these books, which is one of the biggest reasons why they're included on the list. So this next book I wasn't gonna put on the list, but then I was going and grabbing books and I saw it and I was like, screw it, it's going on the list, and that is Life is Like a Musical by Tim Federle, How to Live, Love, and Lead Like a Star. So this is the arc that I got at BookCon because I've yet to pick up a physical copy, but this book pretty much is just like guides to how to audition or be on Broadway, or maybe just deal with like community theater and auditioning for school plays. Just tips and tricks to keep in mind if you're going to be a part of the theater community, and it's just such a fun book because me being an actress myself and doing high school theater and being a part of my school's drama club, a lot of these tips are like incredibly helpful for if you're auditioning for plays or want to act professionally, because it's just things to keep in mind, and really it's stuff to keep in mind just for life or just in any job, like the way that you behave and treat other people and go about your job each day, especially with acting where you're away from your family for long periods of time and you're having to do 8 shows a week and you're just really exhausted, how to manage all of that. And it kind of helps you to understand actors on stage a little bit more. And me being a huge theater lover and growing into my love of theater throughout the past year, this is a story that really helped me understand what it's like to be on stage and helped me to understand what it is that some of my favorite actors go through each week and what the process is like for them being on stage, and coming from an author who has experience not only writing novels but writing books on Broadway, so getting to be behind the scenes and then also being on stage. This is just a really, really reliable novel if you want to have advice about how to survive in the theater community. Tim Federle is just so precious. I absolutely adore him, and I'm so glad that I got to pick up some of his books this year, but this is one that just particularly touched me because of my love for theater. The next book on this list is another one that has to be one of my favorites out of all of these, and that is They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. This is by far my favorite of Adam's books so far because the world is so uniquely developed and there's so many little intricate things that are created to make this world very interesting. It's a lot of buildings and institutions and things that help with this whole futuristic world where you can find out 24 hours before you're going to die, and you get 24 hours then to like live out your life and sort of get your shit together before you die. And it's the most interesting concept ever, and Mateo and Rufus are just so precious. This is also the first book that I reviewed for Teen Read, so it has a really special place in my heart because of that. I also met Adam for the, third time so far. I just adore him and his books, and I'm so excited to get to see more from him in the coming years because he's just such a phenomenal author, and his books always like rip me to shreds, and this is one that definitely very, very, very much hit me. I fell in love with Mateo. He's such a precious character, and he's become one of my favorite fictional characters. I just adore him. I adore this book, and I'm so glad that I got to pick it up this year because I have been dying to get my hands on it for the longest time. So the minute that I read it, I just fell in love with it. It made me so happy that I got to read it this year because this is one that I knew was gonna be one of my favorites the minute that I picked it up. Few more books left, guys. We got this. The next book that I have on this list is another book that I read for school. 2 books that I've read for school. My school is finally giving me good books to read that I am enjoying, and I'm super excited about it, and that is In Cold Blood by Truman Capote. So since I've read this book, I've wanted to go and like dive into all of Truman Capote's books because I love his writing style. With this, I've been starting to get into mystery novels and like true crime a little bit more than I ever have before. After seeing Infamous and like seeing the way that this book was written and some of the things that Truman Capote went through in creating this novel, it just completely changed my perspective on it, and it just really made me fall in love with this story and the way that it was created. And this book just gave me a completely new outlook on Truman Capote because it was the last book that he ever wrote, but it started this whole new genre of true crime. So it's really, really interesting how this book could be so successful but be the end to this man's career because of the emotional turmoil that he went through writing it. It's just so unique to see all of the little details that he puts into this book and how it sort of creates this entire picture. Seeing all these little tiny details as to like why he titled the book the way that he did and the way that he sort of crafts certain characters the way that he does is so compelling, and it just made me so drawn to this world. It was just such a phenomenal novel, and one of those books that I'm really glad I got to read this year because I really was hesitant about it going into it because these type of novels tend to be like for me, but I really, really enjoyed this, and I'm super glad I got to read it this year because it was incredibly fascinating. So next read that I have on this list is Last Seen Leaving by Caleb Rarig. I love this book so much. I love the bluntness to Caleb's writing. It's just the best. It's so funny and adorable, and I love how this book, again, also deals with a character that has to deal with how to come out and deal with his sexuality and being gay and how his parents will react to that and how his friends will react to that. It's just so interesting. And then you also have this whole mystery that's woven into the book dealing with Flynn's missing girlfriend January and him trying to figure out why she disappeared and finding out that there's a lot more about her that he didn't know, and seeing all these crazy twists and turns that go on throughout this book, and like the ending that like leaves you just sitting there being like, what did I just read? It was so intense. I love Caleb Rarig. He's so precious. I got to meet him this year and he was just so wonderful, and I love this book. The The cover is gorgeous, the words inside are gorgeous, and it was just so much fun to read, and it left me like gasping until the very end. It was insane, but it was so much fun to read, and this is a book that I feel like does not get enough appreciation. More people need to read it because it's just so damn good. So the next book on this list is Moxie by Jennifer Mateu. This book is rooted strongly in feminism, and it follows our main character, Vivian, and her pursuits to stand up to her high school sexist behaviors towards women. I really love this book because it just opened up my eyes to a lot of the things that go down in high schools that we just don't notice or turn the other cheek to and just pretend they don't happen because a lot of teenagers don't have the power to stand up against them and fight back. It just made me sort of look at my own high school and some of the things that they do, and it made me realize, like, this isn't fictional. Like, these things that happen within this novel are real, and they happen to teenagers like myself all across the country. Seeing like the dress code policy, that was one big thing that really hit me in this novel, and the way that it's very sexist towards women, and especially teenage girls. I just completely and entirely like took me back, and it really hit me. There was moments where I was crying reading this and smiling because it was just so great to see these girls fight back. I love this novel. I also got to meet Jen, and my aunt actually knew her and went to the same college as her, and they were in the same sorority, so that was really cool to find out. So I love this connection that I have with the book, and I just love the way that this book speaks out about feminism and really opens a lot of teenagers' eyes to the things that are going down in their high school and helps them to be more aware of sexism and how it happens in our daily lives and things that we may not notice or bat an eye to just because we're so used to these things happening and sort of learning that like these things aren't okay. So I really appreciated this novel and the way that it opened my eyes and made me more aware of things that are happening in my own high school. We have a few more books, guys, and my camera battery is almost about to die. Hopefully I can get through. The next book that I have here is Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. And this is John Green's most recent release after several years of taking a hiatus. I love this book so much. It's become definitely up there in my top 3 favorite John Green books. This was another one of our Diversity Reader Book Club Picks of the Month. I loved this book. I loved the characters. I loved the mystery that's sort of wrapped into the story of dealing with mental health and thought spirals and OCD. I love Aza's character and the way that John Green comments on mental illness. I also love how the story just feels like a John Green novel with all of its metaphors and wonderful lines and quotes that just really stick with you, and then all these random really humorous scenes. I got to see John Green on tour, and that was just the coolest thing for me because I've grown up with his books, and I probably wouldn't be standing in front of you right now if it weren't for me picking up The Fault in Our Stars and some of his other books and getting to branch out into the YA world because of his novels. So I was incredibly excited to get to read this year, and it was definitely a story that really stuck with me because it helped me to see more of myself and my own mental illness and things that I go through. So I just really appreciated the manner that it touched me and the way that I was able to find out more about myself because of this novel. The next book on this list is Wonder Woman Warbringer by Leigh Bardugo. I definitely didn't think that this book would make my list of favorites for 2017, but I loved the action scenes, I loved the characters, I loved the diversity in this book, and I love all the twists and turns that it takes. It was just such a fun read and one that I just really enjoyed because it took all the things that Leigh Bardugo is really good at in writing, like Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, and put it into this book with all of the lore of the Wonder Woman world, and it got me so much more into superheroes. And I'm not like a superhero person. I never really grew up with superheroes. I never really watched any like superhero Marvel DC movies. To really enjoy this novel was definitely a surprise for me, and for it to make my favorites is another shock for me, but I just loved it because of the kick-ass characters and the relationships that they have, especially between Diana and Alaya. I just love their friendship, and I love some of the banter in this book. It was just so good and so action-packed and so much fun, and everything that I love about a Leigh Bardugo book with a whole new spin, and something that I felt like was a little bit of a challenge for Leigh Bardugo to write, but she stepped up to the plate. She did a phenomenal job, and I was just so impressed by it. So the last book on this list is one that actually comes out in 2018, but I got a chance to read this year, so I wanted to include it on this list, and that is Zenith by Sasha Ellsberg and Lindsay Cummings. I love this book, and I'm so proud of these two girls for being able to create such a kick-ass sci-fi novel that has such a great group of characters that are all incredibly unique and well-developed in a world that is so incredibly built. Everything is so compelling and interesting to read in the way that the world is developed and how each of these galaxies have their own unique culture and how that reflects in each of the characters. I love the backstory of Andromeda and Dex, and I loved getting to see all the crazy twists and turns that go down in this world. I'm so excited to see what happens in the second book because after finishing this first book, I was just taken taking it back. Again, another crazy book that has tons of twists and turns and thrills and things that will leave you gasping towards the very end and begging for the second book. I loved it so much, and I'm just so proud of these two girls and the success that I know that they're going to have with Zenith, because it was so phenomenal and so much fun to read. I love this book so much, and I'm so excited for all of you to get your hands on it in January, because you are all going to love it. Alright, that's it for my 2017 favorites video. So many good books that I read this year, so many that I know are going to stick with me, books that I really love, and I'm so glad that I got to share them all with you. If you guys want to comment down below one of your favorite reads of 2017, let me know. That being said, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time with a new video. Goodbye!
Yeah.